We'll start here with Nejeed. Quick introduction to yourself. What did you do before, and what are you working on now?
Good morning, folks. It's a pleasure to be here. Big hand up for Chris for putting this all together. I know how much work he did here. My name's Nejeed. I was born and raised here in Vancouver, left for a long time, but found my way back. My most important startups are my two boys. I have 5 and 2, and they're, they say fail fast. You got to fail real fast parenting. I'm a lawyer by trade. About 10 years ago, I started building a tech company. Started in Toronto and moved it here. It was called Keela. We worked in the compliance, fintech, and CRM space for nonprofits and local governments. We sold the company in 2023 to a private equity fund based in San Francisco. I tried to retire, I failed, and now I'm building in the neurotech space. We're doing neurotherapeutics for depression, and specifically PDD, persistent depressive disorder. Really important work, and really fun, and really terrifying, but it's really exciting. Thanks for having me.
Hey everyone, I'm Tom. I initially started my career about 15 years ago. I built a B2B solution which was probably most similar to Slack, scaled it across Europe, and then had the opportunity to exit the company really before Slack came into the European market. Went on from there to build a few other companies, actually with my co-founder Olivia, who you just heard from. And like Olivia, I'm currently building one of the other co-founders of Blok, which is a simulator for product teams.
Hi, I'm Ian. I was co-founder of a company called Later.com. It was the social media management product in town that didn't have an owl as a mascot. Currently, I'm working on Stingray Security. We're making AI tools to mitigate human risk in cybersecurity. That's just a venture-compatible way of saying that we're making a Chrome extension to prevent you from getting scammed or phished. We're doing customer discovery with security awareness people. I'd love to talk to anyone about their programs, either talk to myself or my co-founder Andrew, who's gesticulating over there. But yeah, we're trying to use AI to prevent people from getting socially engineered.
Okay, so maybe we'll start at the end, with Ian. Walk through just conceptually, right? So you come up with this idea, you decide you're going to start working on it. What are some of the consequential things that either by virtue of these scars or successes prior, or just the reality that the world right now is different, what are some of the things that you did materially differently this time around than when you guys started later?
I think early on you have this idea of we need to ramp up and hire a team. And one of the things that hasn't changed, because I've always loved what David Heinemeier Hansen, the creator of Basecamp, and more importantly Ruby on Rails, which is the best platform. If Rails is dead, it's because I'm dead. But he always had this thing about don't do a job as a founder before you hire for it. And I think what AI has really done is it's allowed you to take that a step further. You can try more hats on before you start going to somebody and start hiring out for a specific role. My instinct now is to okay, well, let's see how far I can take this. A lot of the times it's going to tell me how to do a mediocre job at something, because I think the phrase going on in the Valley is that now mediocre is free. So, but mediocre does work for a couple things, and we can see how far, what are we actually competing on? Do I need to be the best in this, or can me and Chatty make do? And what I'm finding is, as a developer, I can get pretty far without hiring other people. We're going to try our own hand at marketing. I don't think that'll go well, but we can at least try and see how hard we fail before we know we have to bring someone in. But when we are hiring someone, okay, we know we need to have a content creator. We know we need to have this, because it turns out we suck at it. So we actually need to fill this role, and there's an absolute need, and you're not just fleshing out an organization tree.
Yeah, I'd echo that. I think when we started building Blok, we probably spent the first 6 months just doing it ourselves, whereas before we've had to hire. I think one of the things that we've been able to leverage in the past this time around that we haven't been able to leverage in the past, is just the speed that we can get an MV out to the customer as well. This time around, we probably had a Streamlit demo for the first 4 or 5 months before we had a product that could actually go into the customer's hands. And that Streamlit demo was enough to onboard our first customers, to make our first sales. I was able to build that in 2 weekends, versus in the past it would have probably taken me a couple of months. So I think the other big thing that has been a massive unlock for us is just the speed at which we can move, and not having to worry so much about hiring engineers or hiring people that can just kind of make sure the code's not crappy. Like, yes, there are issues with some of the kind of tooling the tools that we're using now that, in my opinion, are over bloating. But it's the speed that's the massive unlock for us, and that's allowed us to execute so much faster than we have been able to in the past.
So I'm going to answer this question a little bit differently because I work with people's brains. Well, I don't, thank God, but the people who are on my team do. I think one of the big changes I've seen is about managing expectations around speed. I can't go faster because of AI. Well, I probably could from a technical standpoint, but I can't from a moral, ethical, regulatory standpoint. And so when you're talking to investors, when you're talking to the public about the work you do, everyone assumes that AI is just expediting things. But in some cases, and we do use old school AI, predictive analytics in our tech, it's actually forced us to slow down a little bit. The narrative is around carefulness and trustworthiness and security and all these things in healthcare. And I think, so that's the first comment I'll make. The second one is there's a lot more noise now. Everyone thinks they're a developer, founder, expert because they can type very quickly into an AI platform. When you're talking about a very technical, and I don't mean technical like a lot of people in this room, I mean subject area matter expert, like neuroscience, the intersection of neuroscience, psychology, and cognitive science, everyone is not an expert and neither is ChatGPT. And so the self-awareness that we have to have is much more than it was in the past where nobody claimed to be an expert. So we have to be, it's actually created more carefulness as opposed to just speed and velocity.
And let's dig into that a little more, right? So, everybody here has lanyards with Google on it, right, who's helping us today. Google, if we go back 20 years ago, really changed the world of products when they came out with this product that they slapped the word beta on. And they basically said, for the first time ever, it's okay, this might break. And, back in those days, like, this was unheard of. Now, it feels like we're sort of normalized to imperfect products. All of you are working in areas where that's actually not okay, right? You're working in the area of the brain. You're working on synthetic A/B testing in regulated industries. You're working on cybersecurity. Do you think we're going to see either a divergence, or do you think correctness or accuracy is going to be a competitive advantage? How do you think about developing product in a world where we're kind of desensitized to broken stuff?
So Sam Altman, who's a polarizing figure, said we're entering the fast fashion era of SaaS. That was his soundbite quote, X number of days, weeks, months, it all blends together. And I was reading some commentaries from some folks who I can kind of follow on LinkedIn or whatever it was. And I like the fast fashion analogy because in the rise of fast fashion, you've seen two things. You've seen clothes get cheaper and become crap and be worn once or twice or thrice and then thrown. And you've seen luxury brands and very high quality stuff really dig in and see its heyday. And so my instinct is, in a world where there's a lot of fast fashion, where there's things that are coming up quickly that are probably not very good quality, the people who actually spent the time and the money and the effort and the thinking to not beta, as long as you can hold on long enough, you don't spend too much money, you don't build too big teams, whatever it might be, you're actually going to see the middle class of software is going to go away, and you're going to see the cheap crap, and you're going to see the amazing stuff. And that's my take on, and I think for regulated industries, for when the stakes are really high, it's important for consumers and companies who are buying tools to really understand the difference. The hard part is everything is marketed as amazing.
Right.
And I think that's the opportunity and also the challenge.
That's an interesting thought, and we do have some existing examples of that. If you think, for those of you who use Superhuman, right? You can use Gmail for free or a $30 luxury email. I mean, it's an interesting perspective. Tom?
Yeah, I think now this may be like the simulation space, but I think the space we're operating in, output or accuracy is potentially the most important thing, right? Like, we're saying, don't go and A/B test in the real world, come to us and we'll build synthetic users and we can predict how your customers are going to behave. First question we get is, well, how on earth do you do that? Like, how can you predict how a human's going to behave? the thing that worries me about the industry we're in is I'm seeing a fair few startups now popping up and spinning out essentially the fast fashion version of these tools that are create a prompt and we'll tell you how your customers are going to behave. Now, frankly, the output from that is never going to be good. I think the alpha in this industry...
But Tom, the perception of the output might be good,
true.
and that's the interesting, dangerous part, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I thought that was
100%.
important.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And I think what I see happening certainly in the simulation space is, well, first of all, the alpha is building a good product. But, I mean, the alpha is always going to be building a good product. But what I see happening in this space is the quality, like customers are going to begin to distrust this industry because you're going to see startups come out that build something that doesn't achieve how you wanted it to achieve. So people go, this isn't possible anymore. So I know, for example, with what we're building, probably 9 to 12 months from now, I will have to have the conversation with a customer, which is, I know you've tried this tool, this is how we're better, and being able to show the value of the output, the value of the models that we've built, for me, that's how you win in this space. But again, this could be subject to the fact that we're working in an industry that is trying to predict human behavior, which is hard.
Ian, just one comment on that. The irony is all that is it's actually going to be marketing and brand building and trust that's going to become so important. Because if you can't tell the difference between fancy pair of pants and cheap pair of pants until you wear them and you've done, it becomes how you sculpt the image around them.
100%.
And that's, for a lawyer who's in tech who doesn't know anything about sales or marketing, that's terrifying as a repeat founder. Sorry, Ian.
I think sometimes we forget that shitty code was written before 2023, that there were crap products that didn't go anywhere. There were a lot of juniors kicking out things. The only difference is now we decided, hey, let's give wands to all the muggles and see what happens. The good news is I still spent 7 years at Hogwarts. I know how to make these good. There's a lot of small products that are going to come out. Some of them are going to be pretty mid, and in some cases that's fine. Maybe I don't need to have some big thing. I need one off. But there's going to be a small fortune to be made in unfucking code bases. And there's still going to be a need for like the senior developers. I generally view how it works is that whatever skill level you're at, AI allows you to do that faster. If you're good, if you're a senior developer, it's great. If you're junior, you're going to put out a lot of crap really fast. But I think that only happens until we adapt. Eventually, juniors are going to be the ones who are going to still get better. They're going to realize that coding is not really about writing anymore. It's about assembling code and telling you when, oh, this thing put a monstrous security hole in, and maybe we should lock down those images of driver's licenses in that app that rates guys, or what was it? Yeah, 75,000 leaked. Like, we're going to find those out. We're going to learn those lessons, but people were still doing that before all this. It just means that there's, if we think of it a pyramid, there's going to be more at the bottom, and some products are going to get up, and they're going to hire people who went to Hogwarts, and it'll be fine.
All right, I'm going to ask you guys one more question, and then we'll go to the audience here. This was not intentional, but all three of you founded companies, exited companies, and then built something in a completely different space.
Yeah, that's
So
that's wild,
what's up
right?
with that?
Love of the game. I spent
Or
10
you're a
years doing
masochist.
social media. I'm done with, Zuck or Elon's blood sugar levels affecting my life to that level. But the same thing, it's love of the game. I saw a problem I wanted to solve. It wasn't there. I've got to keep it new, and I had to find something you're passionate about, and there's no getting around that. Like, life's too short to make ERP software. It's just...
To the guy who sold CRMs
Sorry,
for a living.
I'm doing software in Vancouver. Like, if you want to optimize for certain things, yeah, go to the Valley. But I find something that I'm passionate about, I can try here, and that I'm excited about every morning. Like, I want to get up every morning and make sure people don't get scammed. Because the other side of this is that all the bad guys are vibe coding too. There are vibe coded viruses. There's vibe coded phishing sites. Lovable is becoming a real player in, hosting up those up. So the other side of this coin on the security side, in addition to people writing crap software that we will fix, are threat actors who just have access to these same tools, and they don't stop you from writing malicious software because they kind of see both sides of it. So, fun world and too young to retire.
And maybe, Tom, to give a sense, you've got a different background from a lot of the founders here, right? So, before starting this company, one of the things you did was develop software for MI6 to try to identify threats, right? Now you shifted to developer tools, right? So you kind of went the other way there. What was that thought process?
I think two things, like the previous companies I've built, like experimentation was just a headache. It cost too much money. It took too much time. It never worked. We never waited for statistical significance. And yet the Valley has decided that statistical significance and A/B testing is the only way we should be building products, which doesn't make sense. So I think the big thing for me was I experienced this problem firsthand in previous companies that I've built, but I didn't have how am I going to fix this? Then when I was working in the defense side of things, where I was doing a lot of work around predicting human behavior and looking at, frankly, large data sets of noise and trying to work out who was all bark and no action and who was actually going to do something that they later regretted, I kind of said to myself, well, hang on, if we're able to predict human behavior, then would this be something that could be applied to experimentation? So I think everything kind of came full circle for me and for my co-founder Olivia, where we kind of said, well, we hate experimentation. There has to be a better way of doing this. Let's talk to people and see if they hate experimentation too, and they did. And that's essentially what evolved into what we're building today.
So I have the luxury and the privilege to spend a lot of time with founders, teaching, advising, investing, et cetera. And I don't give a ton of advice, but one of the things I always say is fall in love with the problem, not the solution. And because you're going to iterate 10 times to Tulsa before you figure out what's right. And I think, I was working in an industry I was passionate about before, but I also care about other problems. And I'm also too young to retire, and I wanted to be an example for my kids. And so, the problems that we work on in my new world are things that are worth getting out of bed to, but also that I want to be an exemplar to my children, the folks in this room, folks around the country and the world, if I have that opportunity. And so I fell in love with the problem. It was just a different problem from the one I fell in love with when I was 30 or whatever it was.
Amazing. All right, a couple of questions if we've got some.
Yeah, we heard a lot about how AI is changing engineering and whatever, but I'm more curious about the early customer acquisition of things, because you guys have done previous startups, you guys are now doing it in the AI world. How did the B2B or B2C customer acquisition have changed over that time period?
All right, early customer acquisition, how's it different?
Still brutal. There's no getting around that. You are trying to get a big boulder rolling, but there is new opportunities. Gartner's not what it used to be. If you look at Gartner stock, it's getting hit pretty.
I was just going to say, look at their stock price.
Yeah, there's going to be fewer gatekeepers. That's not how people are finding things anymore, but that's the grind. That's the hustle. That's reaching out to people and knowing that every BDR is on autopilot and any decision maker has so much incoming. You've got to find a new sales channel. We're thinking about product-led growth areas. Hopefully, having a great product is still going to have some cachet. It just might take a little longer, but that's that's the core of being an entrepreneur. Hey, I have this solution. I've got to go find people to have a go-to-market strategy for. That's the crux of it.
I think we're going to see a world where people are expecting more, even though they don't know what that means, because it's easier to build or faster to build. That customer, whether that's institutions, consumers, or other businesses, are going to feel like they need more from the first version. And so to me, that means building community earlier is going to be more important. It's sort of like everyone talked about community and channel, but I think it's like the next iteration of what you were saying, Ian, where you have to have customers who are passionate about what you're doing, and they become the people who, they're the echo chambers. You're not catalyzing those echo chambers. If you can do that, I think you're in great shape, and that can be a small community that you curate. Ideally, it's a community that is sort of self-curated, right? But I think you're going to see more and more of community being the moat around successful businesses in this world we live in.
I think the thing I can add is, one of our angel investors used to have a hard time recruiting people to give customer feedback. Everyone knows those, here's a $25 Amazon voucher if you spend 15 minutes filling out a survey that no one cares about and just ticks random boxes. you now have no excuse to speak to customers, to understand what they actually need, to what they want. Like, there is enough AI tooling out there which makes it possible to actually get feedback from customers, and in theory, synthetic customers as well, but like more importantly, to understand if you're actually building the thing that matters. So in the early stages of acquiring those customers now, you should have a much better read on what they actually need, and you should be able to deliver accordingly.
So
And
let me
let me just
clarify that.
add on that. I would say if you have the luxury of being able to physically sit with your customers, so not use technology, but actually, even if it's 3 or 5 or 50, being able to actually talk to them and do this, to me, in a world that's intermediated increasingly by technology and especially generative AI, the human is coming out of it, and the best feedback is this. So if I'm using Tom's software, I want to look him in the face, not on Zoom, and be like, dude, this sucks, this is amazing. And I think he's going to feel that in a different way than we could, especially because of AI and all these intermediations. Sorry.
So, no worries. I just want to double click on that because I think it's what you said is really an impactful thing, right? The guy building A/B testing software just said, hey, there's AI tools that can help me get testing. So how do you actually do that? So for the folks who are building stuff, like what specifically are you using that's enabling you to get that early feedback that before was like a $25 Amazon gift card?
So we're dog fooding our own products, which is definitely helping from building product side of things. When it comes to actually speaking to customers, like you can start at the bottom of the stack, which is like, I was terrible at taking notes. Gemini now does all that for me. So I've got all of the information that I need to be able to kind of go through and make sure that I've collected the right stuff later on. You can go to the top of the stack and look at something like Listen Labs and run synthetic experiments on the kind of synthetic surveys and actually getting results from people without ever having to interface with people because the AI will do it for you. So I think like there's a whole spectrum of like the most basic is you should never leave a meeting not knowing what you talked about because there is enough tooling out there that help you. Now, like I've been on so many calls now where there are more bots in the room than there are people because everyone's got 2 or 3 bots that
Fucking clankers. Like
so there's no excuse. Like you have the notes from that perspective. And then if you're a slightly larger company, you want to move up the scale, then there's obviously the bigger companies that you can work with to scale out the results that you're getting from real humans.
All right, we got time for one more question right here.
Hi. So I was wondering, how much time should one spend talking with customers, getting to know the problem, and like developing the product, and how did it change before and after AI?
Great question.
but a lot of it. It's hard.
All the time?
Like, yeah. This is actually where I think having 2 co-founders, one being technical, one not, can help. From my experience, even when you have like 2 technical people on a team, one kind of naturally devolves into the talk to customers one. Like one person's kind of on the build, another has a bunch of meetings. I think that hasn't changed. What's happened is that the builder person can kind of just go more on their own. Like a solar developer can go really fast now. Because everything kind of, like with software development, is all about working in a team, but if it's all in one's own head, you know, you can go pretty quick. I would say half the time. Usually, like, and I say that as someone who likes building a lot more than I like talking to people, but I know that I'm not building this for myself. It'd be cool, like, you know, if I'm the only one using it, but like, ideally I want a company out of this, so it does require customers, and talking to customers more than you think you have to, because that's always the hardest part naturally for people, so do the hard thing.
I was just gonna, my answer was gonna be more than you think. Because, you know, this is an unpopular thing to say in Vancouver, but there are a lot of hours in a day. Use them. You know, when people are awake.
Skiing, right?
Yeah, skiing on your computer while you're doing user interviews. There's a lot of hours in the day, and when your kids are asleep or you're not talking to customers, you can be coding and building and using every possible hour in the first 3, 6, 12, 24, 36 months to make sure that that feedback is coming, and it doesn't stop when you've got your prototype or your V1 or your V2, is as much time as you can.
And I would actually posit, you know, to kind of bring it all back to your earlier comment of the divergence, you know, between fast fashion and luxury. I suspect there will be a direct correlation between which founders from the earliest days are actually still going and talking to real humans versus trying to skip that that part or vibe code their way past that, and the correlation to do they end up a high quality product.
If
Didn't
everyone, no, please.
Didn't someone look at like things that were launched on Product Hunt 6 months ago, and if they're still active, and it's like less than 5%? Yeah, and that's not even talking about that MIT thing about 95% of things failing with generative AI, but that's the problem. It's much more fun to launch a product than it is to talk to people and make it work.
And I think persistence is the key in so much of these things. It's like failing, screwing up, getting 5 customers, screwing up again. If you expect instant gratification, instant results, fast fashion, call it whatever you want, and you don't push through, I think the ones who do have the stomach and the hustle to push through, I think are going to be the ones who are left, to your point.
And probably the ones who fell in love with the problem.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Really appreciate you joining us today.